So it's been a couple of weeks since I've been in Australia for my trip to the US, and I gotta say, it is great to be back. I was away for about 2.5 weeks on my holidays, and I was starting to get a bit homesick towards the end of it, I'm not gonna lie. The trip itself was much needed. It was an escape from my usual routine that I've been having for the last couple of years. It was great to see my relatives, cousins, grandparents, and family who I didn't even know existed until this trip. I went to the West Coast starting off with LA, then drove to San Francisco on a little road trip, then flew to Vegas, and then finally to Texas. Visited 2 cities in Texas and then ended off the trip there. And as I love finance and the fact that I'm doing this property series, I was looking at things quite often from a money lens and trying to sort of look at things from more of a finance perspective. Each city was unique and had its own little flair, its own little flavor. Let's jump into it, starting off with LA. Now, this was the first city that we landed in to start off our trip, and straight out the airport, it was basically like a movie in terms of everything that was going on, the way that people were speaking, and the overall atmosphere of this country. It felt very American. This city can get pretty crazy in terms of traffic and congestion as well. I'm sure you guys would have heard about LA traffic as well. Of course, it has a couple of beaches as well. And to be honest, if you've seen the beaches in Australia, you're not going to find the beaches here anything special, especially if you've seen the ones in Sydney and basically thousands and thousands of beaches that we have in Australia. Looking at beaches in LA, and I think pretty much anywhere in America, is a bit of disappointment, to be honest with you. Now, this is a property series, so we can talk about housing, of course, and there's a bit of a housing crisis going on in LA as well. Homelessness is definitely quite present, a lot more than you'd see in the streets of Sydney. Prices for property are quite expensive and people are finding it quite tough. Even, groceries and such, just normal everyday living expenses and such are quite expensive. Not to mention some very sketchy areas as well in terms of the people that are there and the feeling of things just not being quite safe as they are in Australia. The streets in the metro area of this city literally smell like this. I am not even kidding. It's legal over there for recreational use, I believe. So, you see people doing it quite openly and quite happily. So you are going to have to put up with that if you haven't already. And it seemed to me that everybody was in their own little world, doing their own little thing. There seems to be quite a lot of different characters on the streets while I was walking on them and such. So it was quite wild to see. I don't think you'd see such crazy and wacky characters in the streets of Sydney. Definitely a very LA thing. Finishing up with LA, we did a road trip to San Francisco. Half of it was the coastal drive, that was very amazing, and the other half was spent on the highway. Pretty good road trip, I would say, and I was quite excited about this city, and to be honest with you, looking at it in hindsight, I have mixed opinions. On the one hand, this city represents what America does best, in my opinion, which is being the global leaders in technology. Especially for the last couple of decades, this city represents innovation and is not too far from Silicon Valley. And as you guys would know, lots of massive tech companies were built and operate from this city. So it's a pretty big thing and it's pretty amazing to see. And I was looking very forward to finally going to this city and actually checking out the scene in San Fran. I've talked about tech a lot on this channel and how it ties in with investing and my own personal portfolio as well. So it was a pretty exciting thing for me to go into and actually have a look. The city on just looks itself is quite beautiful. I love the trams, I love the steep hills, the Golden Gate Bridge and all. It was just amazing. But if you haven't heard already, this city has a housing crisis as well as a homelessness and drug crisis that has worsened over the years. I spoke with a couple of locals even before going to the city, and we were basically warned to be quite careful with our belongings, to not stay out too late at night, to be always careful, to not leave valuables in the car because people can just go in, steal them, and it gave a very horrible feeling without even visiting the actual city itself. Everybody was kind of being quite negative towards this. In fact, even the local government themselves have put up signs in local areas next to parks and next to other public parking to not leave valuables in the car for tourists and such, because people will literally just go in, steal it, it'll be very quick and you can lose your belongings. So that was quite disappointing to see that this problem is not really being fixed, and there's signs to warn people, but that's not going to solve the actual problem, and it's quite difficult to solve. I'm not going to get into it, but it was very, very disappointing to see. At night, depending on the area you're staying in, some places can be quite sketchy. the place we were staying at was not in the best of neighborhoods, so it was quite an interesting experience. We almost had a confrontation with a homeless person that was intending to be quite violent. Basically, anybody from the street could come into the inn that we were staying at, so it was quite dangerous to have it like that. We didn't realize it was going to be this bad, but that left a very bad taste in my mouth for this city. On looks itself, it's amazing, but I think with the issues that it has, the underlying issues, that needs to be fixed. To add fuel to the fire, the streets smell like this and this. I am not even kidding. I wish I was exaggerating, but it literally smells like these two things in certain areas. Some of the streets were extremely unclean with just rubbish everywhere, plastic bags, cans and such, and we were told that the city streets in that area were cleaned only 2 weeks ago, yet they were so dirty, which was quite disappointing to see yet again. If I compare San Francisco to Sydney, I can't even begin to imagine if Sydney was to be able to turn into that. I just don't think it would happen. It's just very disappointing to even think about. And looking at San Francisco, it's a city that's basically going downhill over the years, and I really hope that things can turn around and the state government and the local government or whatever, whoever is in charge of these things, can actually put things in place to have it fixed, because yeah, it's very disappointing. It's not a safe place to live or invest either. It seems to be driving people away. So I'm gonna move on to the next city that I visited, which was Las Vegas. Alright, so this place, if you haven't been here before, is basically how you'd expect it, how you've seen in movies and TV shows. It is all basically there, it's all true. Big on nightlife, partying and other not so PG activities, dining, and of course you've got the world famous casinos and gambling and basically 24/7 entertainment. I was extremely shocked to see pokie machines in 7-Eleven. The fact that it's so unregulated over there is just absolutely insane. I couldn't even begin to imagine gambling machines in 7-Eleven in Sydney or Australia in general. We have it quite under wraps. It's a pretty big problem here as well, but over there it's just very free. You could see pokie machines in the airport terminal as well. So while you're waiting for your flight, instead of waiting there on your phone, you could literally just be gambling, and just it's such a big money maker for this entire city. It's basically what runs the city. Now, as we were coming into land, you could see that this city is basically built on top of a desert, and this reminded me a lot of coming into landing when you're coming into Dubai. Basically it's very similar. I could draw parallels between both cities that are built on top of deserts, so that's that. I don't think this is a place where you'd want to stay at if you want to raise a family and kids. I just don't think it's the right environment. If you look at the industries that run this city, it's very much entertainment, gambling and such, so I don't think it's going to be the right environment for that purpose. You've only got a handful of industries in terms of employment opportunities that you can really give your service to, and I think because it's built on top of a desert, there's always a looming threat of water supply. I got to speak to a local about the housing situation there, and what he mentioned was that while yes, housing seems to be growing, it will eventually be capped because of the limited water supply. That's going to be the main factor of what's going to limit housing. Eventually there will be caps in place. The water levels that seem to run the city seems to be dropping over time, so that's going to be a big factor as well, I think, when it comes to housing and basically the entire growth of the city. It essentially seems to be a tourist hub, more or less. Now, this is what I've heard from one local that I spoke with. I haven't really fact-checked this, so please make sure that if you're looking into it, please do so, do your own research and go from there. I don't think many people watching this channel are looking to invest in this area, but still, for general knowledge purposes, please fact check this. So based on this, I don't think this would be the best place to invest. Moving on to the great big state of Texas, starting off with Dallas. Now, the one thing about Texas which I've learned is that everything here seems to be big. Now, this is a general trend with America where things are just big in terms of houses, food orders, food sizes, clothing sizes, basically everything. But Dallas seems to, or Texas in general, really seems to exaggerate this feature of America. People love driving big trucks there, or as we call them, utes. In Sydney, I think you mostly see Toyota Hiluxes or Ford Rangers for the most part, but over there you see even bigger trucks. Massive Ford F-250s, Dodge Rams, Chevy Silverado, and the list goes on and on. Everybody seems to be driving some massive pickup truck. I think if you look at it in terms of American history for automobiles, I think the Ford F-150, the truck, has been the best-selling vehicle of all time. So that really shows you the mentality of Americans and them just driving big trucks in general. Now, what I saw was that this translated into homes as well. Homes seem to be generally bigger than LA. You could see that homes had big rooms, big master bedrooms, big fridges, big bathrooms, basically big everything, lots of large open spaces. It seems that people seem to live quite big in Texas in terms of the overall space that they are residing in. And I think the reason why is because this city is mostly flat compared to LA or even compared to Sydney, meaning that this city has lots and lots of land. It can basically keep on expanding. By going on some road trips from Dallas to Houston, I basically saw that once you get out of the metropolitan area of the city, it's basically flat land, flat grass, flat sort of farmland. You won't really see high-rises in the suburbs. You will only really see them in the city center. The city itself is mostly flat. There's not going to be too many big high-rise apartments because they've got so much land. They can afford to expand and build big and sort of keep on expanding the city center as they go. The housing situation seems to be a lot more affordable compared to California and compared to the Sydney market as well. What you're getting for the same amount of money in Dallas is a lot bigger, a lot more, and just generally decent room compared to Sydney's market, where I think with Sydney, we're basically restricted when it comes to the land situation, right? We've got the ocean to the east, we've got the mountains to the west, and you can't really expand too much because that's how Sydney basically is. So, and our city has, I think, a population of 5 million, which is 20% of Australia's population, where Dallas, I think, only has a population of a couple million, I think 2 or 3. So the city itself can, because of the features, it can keep on expanding, and I think the housing situation is quite good there. And if you look at the job situation too, that seems to be quite decent as well, with lots of people moving in, which allows businesses to operate from here and so on and so on. But the one massive drawback of the city is the fact that there are no beaches. So if you're into beaches, this city is not going to be for you. They love their big highways in Dallas as well. As you would have seen in movies, they like to call them spaghetti highways. So there you go. The last city I visited was Houston, Texas. Now, I didn't really get to travel too much here, and I don't remember too much. It was only really 2 or 3 days that we visited. It was basically the same as Dallas, but except it was more humid. This city is linked to the beach on the south, and I've got to say, this beach was one of the worst beaches I have ever been on in a Western country. I'm really sorry to say this, but it just didn't hit right. The water color was almost brown. I'm not sure if the water was clean. I don't think so. I think Texas has a big thing for oil, so I'm not sure if that's being mixed into the water, but for some reason, the beach water was just not clean, although the beach itself seemed okay. Not sure what's going on with that, but I would not be swimming in that water. The beach was called Galveston Beach. Anyways, this concludes my US trip. As you can see, each city has its own quirks and flavors. Having my first international holiday since COVID was much needed. The US is a very interesting place, and I'm interested to learn more about it. I would definitely love to go again. I don't think I'm done with the US just yet, but it's not a place that I would be moving to stay and live there, I don't think, at least not long term. It's definitely worth visiting if you haven't done so already. This video was part 12. I'll see you guys in part 13. Bye now.